Dear friends, we're working hard to share these with you. Please subscribe and like our work. Thank you in advance. If you're ready, let's begin our story. The stench of cheap alcohol and desperation still lingered in Kira Thorne's nostrils when she regained consciousness in a cramped transport pod, her stepfather's final words echoing with brutal clarity: too wide, too soft, too plump, no decent family would want her for breeding stock. At least this way she's worth something. Kira's hands trembled as she touched her pointed ears, the delicate tips that marked her as half-Altairian, mixed blood that her stepfather had used to justify treating her as disposable property rather than family. Her pale, luminescent skin bore the subtle glow that came from her alien heritage, the same heritage that had made her mother beautiful enough to catch his attention years ago, but apparently made her daughter nothing more than an embarrassment to be discarded when convenient. "Well, you're awake," said a voice from beyond the pod's transparent barrier. "Good. Easier to do business with conscious cargo." Kira looked up to see Captain Rex Valone studying her through the pod's viewing window, his weathered features and cybernetic eye patch giving him exactly the kind of dangerous appearance she'd expected from the slave trader who'd purchased her for the price of her stepfather's gambling debts and a bottle of Corellian whiskey. Rex was tall and broad-shouldered, with scars that suggested a history of violence and an expression that seemed to catalog her value with clinical efficiency. "Let me out," Kira said, her voice stronger than she'd expected despite the circumstances. "Not yet," Rex replied, though his tone carried less hostility than she'd anticipated. "First we need to establish some ground rules about your situation and my expectations. My situation is that I was sold like livestock by someone who was supposed to protect me," Kira said, anger finally breaking through the numbness that had protected her during the transaction in that squalid cantina. "Your expectations are irrelevant to me." Rex's expression shifted slightly, showing something that might have been surprise or approval. "Your stepfather mentioned you had a mouth on you. Said it was another reason respectable families wouldn't want you, too opinionated for proper wives." "Respectable families," Kira repeated bitterly. "He spent 3 years trying to arrange marriages for me, and every potential family rejected me for the same reasons. Too curvy, too soft, mixed blood, bad attitude. Not fit to raise proper children or maintain a proper household. And what do you think about their assessment?" The question caught Kira off guard. In her experience, men like Rex didn't ask for her opinions about anything, let alone her own worth. "I think respectable families have very narrow definitions of acceptable." "They do," Rex agreed, moving closer to the pod's control panel. "Question is, what happens to people who don't fit those narrow definitions?" "They get sold to slave traders for drinking money," Kira said flatly. "Some do," Rex acknowledged. "Others find different kinds of value in different kinds of places." He activated the pod's release mechanism, and Kira stepped out into what appeared to be a ship's cargo bay that was cleaner and better maintained than anything she'd expected from someone in Rex's profession. The space was organized with military precision, and she noticed that several of the crew members moving about their duties bore the kind of scars and modifications that suggested they'd all survived difficult circumstances. "Welcome to the Liberator," Rex said, gesturing around the cargo bay. "Before you ask, yes, the name is intentional, and no, it doesn't mean what you probably think it means." "What does it mean?" "It means this ship and this crew specialize in liberating people from situations they don't want to be in," Rex replied, his scarred features showing something that might have been grim humor. "Including people whose families decide they're worth more as trade goods than as relatives." Kira stared at him, processing implications that challenged everything she thought she understood about her situation. "You're saying you didn't buy me to sell me to someone else?" "I'm saying I bought you to get you away from someone who clearly didn't deserve to have you in the first place," Rex said, his voice carrying anger that seemed directed at her stepfather rather than at her. "What happens next depends on what you want to do with the freedom you've just been handed." "Freedom?" Kira laughed bitterly. "I'm on a slave trader's ship with no credits, no friends, and nowhere to go. That's not freedom, that's just a different kind of prison." "Prison is when someone else controls your choices," Rex said firmly. Freedom is when you get to make those choices yourself, even if they're not easy ones. Kira looked around the cargo bay, noting details that suggested Rex's operation was more complex than simple human trafficking. The equipment was sophisticated, the crew moved with purpose rather than fear, and everything about the ship suggested competence and organization rather than the chaos she'd expected from criminal operations. "What kind of choices are you talking about?" she asked carefully. "Choice to stay with us and learn skills that might be useful in our line of work," Rex said. "Choice to be dropped off at any civilized planet where you can start over with a clean identity and enough credits to get established. Choice to help us with operations that involve getting other people out of situations similar to what you just escaped from." "And what's the catch?" "Because there's always a catch with offers that sound too good to be true." Rex's smile showed more warmth than his reputation suggested. "The catch is that none of those options involve going back to the kind of life your stepfather had planned for you. Once you're free, you stay free. We don't rescue people just to hand them back to the systems that failed them in the first place." Kira felt something shift inside her chest, a spark of something that might have been hope, though she was afraid to trust it after months of systematic devaluation and ultimate betrayal. "Why would you care what happens to someone like me? Someone like you?" Rex's expression hardened slightly. "You mean someone who survived years of being told she was worthless by people who should have protected her, someone who still has enough fight left to challenge a slave trader instead of just accepting whatever fate he hands her. Someone who's too wide, too soft, too plump to be worth anything to anyone," Kira said quietly, repeating her stepfather's assessment with the automatic precision of someone who'd heard it too many times to forget. Rex moved closer, his presence somehow both intimidating and reassuring. "Kira Thorne, let me tell you something about worth. Your stepfather sold you for the price of a bottle of liquor because he's a pathetic excuse for a human being who couldn't recognize value if it was handed to him with an instruction manual. That says everything about him and nothing about you." "Easy words," Kira replied, though she could feel her defenses wavering. "But the marriage market doesn't lie. 3 years of rejections from every respectable family on the planet." "The marriage market," Rex said with obvious disgust, "values women like livestock, breeding potential, social connections, political advantages. It doesn't value intelligence, strength, courage, or any of the qualities that actually matter when life gets difficult." Kira looked at him directly, seeing something in his cybernetic eye and scarred features that suggested he understood rejection and dismissal from personal experience. "And you think I have those qualities?" "I think you have qualities that your stepfather was too blind and selfish to recognize," Rex replied. "And I think you deserve the chance to discover what those qualities are worth when they're appreciated instead of dismissed." For the first time since waking up in the transport pod, Kira felt something other than despair about her future. It might be naive to trust a man with Rex's reputation, but after years of systematic degradation from someone who was supposed to care about her, even the possibility of being valued felt like salvation. 3 weeks aboard the Liberator had shattered every assumption Kira had developed about slave traders, criminals, and her own prospects for survival. Instead of the hellish existence she'd expected, she found herself integrated into a crew that operated with the precision of a military unit and the loyalty of a chosen family, all united around missions that involved rescuing rather than enslaving vulnerable beings throughout the sector. "The target facility holds approximately 40 captives," Rex explained during the morning briefing, his tactical displays showing detailed schematics of a mining operation that used trafficked workers in conditions that violated every civilized world's labor laws. "Intelligence suggests most are debt prisoners whose families sold them to cover financial obligations." Kira felt her stomach clench with recognition. "Like me." "Like you were supposed to be," Rex corrected, his voice carrying the edge it always took on when discussing trafficking operations. "But unlike you, they don't have anyone working to get them out." The crew around the briefing table represented exactly the kind of people her stepfather would have dismissed as unsuitable: a former pleasure slave whose cybernetic modifications had been forced on her, a disabled veteran whose injuries had made him worthless to military recruiters, a mixed-species woman whose appearance made her unemployable in respectable positions. All of them had found value and purpose aboard Rex's ship after being discarded by societies that had no use for their particular combinations of capabilities and limitations. Kira's been working on communication protocols, announced Zara, the ship's engineer, whose own rescue from an abusive situation had made her one of Rex's most trusted crew members. Her Altairian heritage gives her advantages with the long-range scanning that could make extraction coordination more efficient. Rex looked at Kira with obvious approval. "Show me what you've developed." Over the past weeks, Kira had discovered that her mixed heritage provided abilities she'd never been encouraged to develop. Her Altairian neural patterns allowed her to interface with communication systems in ways that pure humans couldn't match, while her human adaptability let her work with technology that pure Altairians found incompatible with their biology. The facility's communication arrays operate on frequencies that most species can't detect, Kira explained, activating displays that showed the patterns she'd identified. But Altairian sensory capabilities can track the signal variations that indicate how many people are being held in different sections of the complex. "And that helps us how?" asked Marcus, the ship's security chief, whose own rescue from a military prison had made him suspicious of anything that seemed too convenient. "It helps us plan extraction routes that avoid guard concentrations and identify victims who might be too weak or injured to move quickly," Kira replied, her confidence growing as she saw the crew's genuine interest in her contributions. "Instead of going in blind, we can map the entire situation before we commit to action." Rex studied her analysis with the intensity he brought to all operational planning. "This could revolutionize how we approach facility extractions." "How long have you been working on this?" "Since the second day I was here," Kira admitted. "I needed something to do besides think about how my stepfather sold me, and the technical challenges were distracting." "Distracting," Rex repeated, his tone suggesting he understood exactly what kind of thoughts she'd been trying to avoid. "And now?" "Now I think I might actually be useful for something other than disappointing potential husbands," Kira said, surprised by her own honesty. The briefing room fell silent as crew members exchanged glances that suggested they recognized the significance of what she'd just admitted. These were people who had all faced systematic devaluation before finding their place aboard the Liberator, and they understood the courage required to begin believing in your own worth again. "Kira," Rex said quietly, his scarred features showing more gentleness than his reputation suggested, "you were never the problem. The system that convinced you that your value was tied to other people's approval was the problem." "Easy to say when you haven't spent 3 years being rejected by every family who saw you as a potential addition to their household," Kira replied, though without the bitterness that had characterized her earlier responses to reassurance. "Hard to say when you've spent 10 years watching people like your stepfather destroy people like you for profit," Rex countered. "But easier to say when you've also spent those years watching people discover what they're actually capable of when someone believes in them." Their conversation was interrupted by urgent signals from the ship's proximity sensors, indicating that another vessel was approaching at high speed with what appeared to be aggressive intent. "Unknown ship approaching the Liberator," came the transmission on official frequencies. "This is Enforcer Captain Nash representing the Thorne family consortium. We demand the immediate return of stolen family property." Kira felt ice form in her stomach as she recognized the voice. "That's my stepfather's business partner. He must have tracked your ship somehow." Rex's expression shifted to the kind of cold fury that reminded everyone why his reputation as someone not to cross was well-deserved. "Your stepfather sold you. That makes any claim of theft legally invalid." "Legal validity doesn't matter to men like Nash," Kira said, fear making her voice tight. "They have connections throughout the sector judiciary. If they want me back, they'll find ways to make it happen." "They'll find ways to try," Rex corrected, his hand moving to the communication controls. "But they'll discover that stealing people back from my crew involves considerably more complications than they bargained for." Through the ship's communication system, Rex responded to the approaching vessel with the kind of controlled menace that made his reputation for being dangerous entirely justified. "Enforcer Captain Nash, this is Captain Rex Valone of the independent vessel Liberator. The individual you're referring to as property is a free citizen under my protection, and any attempt to interfere with her autonomy will be treated as an act of aggression. Captain Valone, the Thorne family has legal documentation proving ownership rights to the individual in question. Surrender her immediately or face legal and physical consequences. Rex looked at Kira across the briefing table, his cybernetic eye gleaming with something that suggested he was looking forward to the confrontation. Kira, I need you to answer one question honestly. Do you want to go back to your stepfather and his business arrangements? I'd rather die first, Kira said without hesitation, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Good, Rex replied with satisfaction that suggested he'd been hoping for exactly that answer. Because Captain Nash is about to discover that taking people from my crew requires going through me first, and I don't make that process easy for anyone. As the crew prepared for what was clearly going to be either a legal battle or an actual battle, Kira realized that somewhere during her weeks aboard the Liberator, she had stopped thinking of herself as cargo waiting to be delivered and started thinking of herself as part of something that was worth fighting for. Rex's protection of her wasn't just professional courtesy or tactical advantage, it was genuine care for someone whose worth he had recognized when everyone else, including herself, had given up on finding any value in who she was. The confrontation with Captain Nash evolved into exactly the kind of complex legal and tactical situation that demonstrated why Rex's crew had become so effective at protecting people from systems designed to exploit them. Instead of simple violence, the dispute required careful maneuvering through interstellar law, documentation verification, and the kind of bureaucratic warfare that could destroy lives more efficiently than any weapon. The purchase documentation is legitimate, Rex announced after hours of reviewing the legal claims Nash had presented. Your stepfather did have the legal right to sell you under the debt servitude statutes that govern your home planet. Kira felt her hope deflate like a punctured oxygen tank. So I have to go back. So we have to find better legal grounds for keeping you here, Rex corrected, his expression carrying the determined focus he brought to all seemingly impossible problems. Which means we need to understand exactly what Nash and your stepfather are really trying to accomplish. The answer came from an unexpected source, intercepted communications between Nash's ship and several other vessels that revealed the Thorne family consortium's involvement in a trafficking network that was considerably more extensive and profitable than simple debt collection. Kira's sale had been part of a larger operation that moved vulnerable people through a system designed to generate ongoing revenue rather than simply resolving financial obligations. They're not trying to recover their investment in you, Zara explained as she displayed the intercepted data. They're trying to protect their supply chain. If word spreads that people can escape their contracts by joining rescue operations, it threatens their entire business model. So this isn't about me specifically, Kira realized. It's about making sure no one else gets ideas about resistance. It's about both, Rex said grimly. Nash wants you back as an example, but he also wants to eliminate my crew as a threat to their operations. The legal battle stretched over days, with Nash's forces maintaining position while teams of lawyers and bureaucrats argued about jurisdictions, contracts, and the rights of beings who had been sold into servitude. Through it all, Kira found herself working more closely with Rex than ever before, her communication skills and cultural knowledge becoming essential to their defense strategy. The mining facility extraction will have to be postponed, Marcus reported during one of their strategy sessions. We can't commit resources to a rescue operation while fighting off Nash's legal claims. Which means 40 people stay enslaved while we argue about paperwork, Kira said, frustration making her voice sharp. All because my stepfather decided I was worth more as a commodity than as a person. Rex looked at her across the tactical display, his scarred features showing something that made her pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with fear or anger. Kira, you've been blaming yourself for this situation since it started. But you're not responsible for your stepfather's greed or Nash's exploitation network. I'm the reason they're here threatening your crew and delaying your missions, she pointed out. You're the reason we discovered their trafficking network and can start dismantling it systematically, Rex corrected. And you're the reason we've developed new extraction techniques that will make future rescue operations more effective. Through their weeks of working together, Kira had begun to understand that Rex's appreciation of her extended far beyond her tactical contributions. His attention to her well-being, his fury at anyone who suggested she was worthless, and his obvious pride in her growing confidence suggested feelings that went deeper than professional respect or protective instincts. "Rex," she said carefully, "why is keeping me here so important to you? Not to the crew, not to the mission, to you personally." Rex was quiet for several minutes, his cybernetic eye focusing on something beyond the tactical displays. "Because the first time I saw you in that transport pod, I saw someone who had been convinced she was worthless by people who were too blind to recognize what they had," he said finally. "And I've been where you were, Kira. I know what it's like to be discarded by people who should have valued you. What happened to you? Military discharge after my injuries made me unsuitable for active duty. Family disownment when my criminal record made me unsuitable for respectable employment. The same cycle of systematic devaluation that you experienced, just with different criteria for worthlessness." Kira felt something shift in her understanding of their relationship. "So you rescued me because you recognized yourself in my situation." "I rescued you because you deserved better than what you were getting," Rex replied. "But I want to keep you here because working with you has made me realize that the qualities your stepfather dismissed as flaws are exactly the qualities that make you perfect for the life we've built together." "Perfect how?" Rex moved closer, his presence somehow both intimidating and reassuring. "Your gentleness with rescue victims, your intelligence with tactical problems, your strength in facing situations that would break people who hadn't survived what you survived. You're not too soft, Kira. You're exactly as compassionate as someone in our line of work needs to be. And the other things? Too wide, too plump, all the physical attributes that made me unsuitable for marriage." Rex's smile carried heat that made her skin warm despite the ship's environmental controls. "Those attributes make you beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with other people's standards and everything to do with what actually matters when you're looking for someone to share your life with." Their conversation was interrupted by urgent signals indicating that Nash's legal maneuvering had reached some kind of conclusion, but Kira found herself less concerned about external threats than about the implications of what Rex had just revealed about his feelings for her. "The legal ruling came through," Zara announced over the communication system. "Nash's claims have been rejected on technical grounds, but there's more. The investigation into their trafficking network has resulted in arrest warrants for Nash and your stepfather on charges of operating an illegal slavery operation." Rex and Kira looked at each other across the tactical display, both understanding that their legal victory was also a personal triumph that validated everything they'd discovered about each other's worth during their time together. "So I'm free," Kira said, the words carrying wonder as if she was testing their reality. "You're free to make choices about your future without external pressure," Rex confirmed. "Including choices about whether you want to stay with this crew and continue developing the capabilities that make you so valuable to our operations. And choices about whether I want to explore what you meant about sharing your life with someone." Kira asked, surprised by her own boldness. Rex's expression shifted to something that combined hope with the kind of careful vulnerability that came from years of learning not to expect good things to last. "Only if those are choices you want to make freely, not because you feel obligated or because you think you don't have other options." Kira looked around the tactical center that had become more familiar and comfortable than any home she'd ever known, surrounded by people who valued her contributions and cared about her well-being, working on missions that used her abilities to help others escape the kind of systematic devaluation she'd experienced herself. "Rex Valone," she said with growing confidence, "I think the choices I want to make freely are exactly the choices that will keep me here with you and this crew, doing work that matters with people who matter to me. Even though it means giving up any chance of the conventional life your family thought you should want. Especially because it means giving up a conventional life that was never going to appreciate who I actually am," Kira replied, realizing that her stepfather's cruel assessment had accidentally delivered her to exactly where she belonged. 6 months after Nash's legal defeat and her stepfather's arrest on trafficking charges, Kira stood in the Liberators' communication center coordinating the most complex rescue operation they'd ever attempted, a multi-facility extraction that required precisely the kind of inter-system coordination that her mixed Altairian heritage made possible. Her work had evolved from desperate distraction to genuine expertise, and her role aboard Rex's ship had transformed from rescued victim to indispensable partner. Facility 7 reports successful extraction, she announced, her enhanced communication abilities allowing her to monitor rescue operations across 6 different systems simultaneously. 37 victims secured and transported to safe relocation sites. Outstanding work, Rex said, his voice carrying the pride and affection that had become her favorite sounds in the galaxy. Total rescued across all facilities. 216 people, Kira replied with satisfaction that went far beyond professional accomplishment. All placed with legitimate employment or reunification programs that verified their voluntary participation. The successful completion of their largest rescue operation was also a personal milestone, proof that the qualities her stepfather had dismissed as worthless had become the foundation for saving lives and dismantling trafficking networks throughout their sector of space. There's something else, Rex said, his tone carrying the kind of significance that made everyone in the communications center look up from their displays. The Galactic Rescue Alliance has formally recognized our operations and offered official support for expansion into other sectors. Kira felt her breath catch as the implications sank in. You mean legitimizing what we do? Making it an official organization instead of a criminal operation? I mean transforming what we do into a model that other crews can replicate throughout the galaxy, Rex confirmed. With you as Director of Communications and Victim Coordination, and me as Director of Operations. Co-directors, Kira corrected automatically. This operation works because we work together as equals, not because one of us directs the other. Rex's smile carried warmth that had nothing to do with professional relationships and everything to do with the personal partnership that had developed alongside their working collaboration. Co-directors, he agreed. Partners in every way that matters. Their moment was interrupted by incoming priority communications that carried signatures Kira recognized with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. It's from my home planet. Official government channels. The transmission revealed that her stepfather's arrest had triggered investigations that exposed the entire debt servitude system as a front for trafficking operations, leading to legal reforms that prohibited the sale of family members to settle financial obligations. The planetary government was offering formal apologies to everyone who had been sold under the previous system, along with reparations and guaranteed citizenship rights that could never be revoked for economic reasons. They want you to return as a symbol of reform, Rex observed after reviewing the official invitation. Full pardons for your family's debts, guaranteed housing and employment, recognition as a victim of systemic abuse. And what do you think about that offer? Kira asked, though she could see in Rex's expression that he was trying to hide his own feelings about the possibility of losing her. I think you deserve every form of recognition and reparation they're offering, Rex said carefully. And I think you should make whatever choice feels right for your future, regardless of what anyone else wants or expects. Kira looked around the communications center that had become her domain, at the displays showing their expanding rescue operations, at the crew that had become her chosen family, and at Rex whose belief in her worth had made everything else possible. My future, she repeated thoughtfully. You mean the future where I go back to a planet that now admits it was wrong to treat me as disposable property? Or the future where I continue working with people who never thought I was disposable in the first place? I mean the future where you get to choose what matters most to you, Rex replied, though his voice carried hope that suggested which choice he preferred. Rex Valone, Kira said, moving closer until she could see her reflection in his cybernetic eye, when you bought me from my stepfather in that cantina, what exactly were you planning to do with someone who was supposedly too wide, too soft, too plump to be useful for anything respectable? I was planning to show her that the people who called her those things were too blind to recognize perfection when it was right in front of them, Rex replied, his scarred hands reaching for hers with the gentle reverence he'd shown her since their first day together. And have you succeeded in that plan? I've succeeded in discovering that you're even more perfect than I realized when I first saw you in that transport pod, Rex said, his voice carrying the kind of absolute certainty that made her heart race. Perfect for this work, perfect for this crew, and perfect for someone who spent years thinking he'd never find anyone worth sharing his life with completely. Kira felt tears she hadn't shed since her rescue finally beginning to well in her eyes, not tears of pain or fear, but tears of recognition and gratitude for the journey that had brought her from her stepfather's cruel dismissal to Rex's unconditional appreciation. Then I should probably mention that the choice I'm making about my future involves staying exactly where I am, she said, intertwining her fingers with his. With the work that uses my abilities, the crew that values my contributions, and the man who saw my worth when everyone else, including myself, had given up looking for it. Even if it means giving up the recognition and reparations your home planet is offering. Especially if it means giving up recognition from people who only value me now because it's politically convenient, Kira replied. I'd rather be appreciated for who I actually am by people who matter to me than celebrated for who they wish I'd been by people who discarded me when it was convenient. Rex's expression carried joy that made his scars seem like badges of honor rather than marks of damage. Kira Thorne, are you saying you choose this life permanently? I'm saying I choose you permanently, Kira corrected, rising on her toes to kiss someone who had transformed her from unwanted cargo into an irreplaceable partner. And the life we've built together that turns out to be exactly what someone like me was meant for all along. As the communication center around them hummed with ongoing rescue operations and their crew continued the work of helping people escape systematic devaluation, Kira realized that her stepfather's cruelest assessment had accidentally delivered her to the only place in the galaxy where someone could be too compassionate, too intelligent, and too strong to fit conventional expectations, and be valued for exactly those qualities. Her body had been declared unfit to raise a traditional family, but it turned out to be perfect for building a chosen family of people who specialized in saving others from the same kind of dismissal she'd experienced, proving that sometimes the most brutal betrayals lead to the most extraordinary discoveries about what we're actually worth when someone sees us clearly.